Grandpa's health started to decline when I was in my late 20s. At first, it was little things, forgetting names, losing track of time. Then it got worse. He was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, and Grandma, who was already struggling with arthritis, became his full-time caregiver. Although in reality, most of the caregiving fell to me. They tried their best to be self-sufficient, but they needed my help more and more. One day after Grandpa had a particularly bad day, I confronted Meredith in the hopes that I could enlist her help. "Meredith, I need your help. We can't do this alone."
I'm not a nurse, Corey. Find someone else. Maybe find someone that gives a crap.
They took us in when we had no one. Don't you feel any obligation to repay that kindness?
Nope. I didn't ask to be born into this family. And besides, why would I want to take care of them? I can think of way more fun things to do than to hang around two old farts and a loser like you.
Her apathy was infuriating, and her cruelty was unbearable. She started yelling at Grandpa when he forgot things, calling him useless and a burden. She mocked Grandma for being slow and clumsy. Hi there, my name is Corey. If I'm being honest, my life has always revolved around my sister, Meredith. Not by choice, but because she's the kind of person who demands attention, selfish, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. We used to be close when we were little, but everything changed when our parents died in a car accident. I was 15, Meredith was 17, and suddenly, we were orphans. Grandma Rose and Grandpa Eric, our father's parents, stepped in. They were already in their late 60s, but they didn't hesitate to take us in. "Family takes care of family," Grandpa said when we moved in. They gave us a stable home and all the love they had. But Meredith didn't see it that way. To her, it was just another burden she didn't want to carry.
Meredith, do you mind setting the table for dinner?
Do it yourself, Grandma. I'm busy.
She asked you nicely, Meredith. The least you can do is help out. Maybe stop staring at your phone all day and stop being lazy.
Oh, shut up, Corey. No one asked for your opinion.
This was typical Meredith. Always taking, never giving. When Grandpa lent her money to buy a used car, he made her promise to look for a job. Instead, she spent her days driving to parties and racking up parking tickets. Not only that, but since our grandparents co-signed for the car for her, they started getting calls from collections agencies when she stopped making car payments. "Meredith, you're 3 months behind on payments. They're threatening to repossess and tow the car."
Relax, Grandpa. It's just a car.
"But we co-signed for it. If they repossess it, that will negatively affect our credit score."
I can always get another.
"It's not just a car. Meredith, are you really so selfish and stupid that you don't realize that if they repossess it, that means that you won't get another one? No car dealership is going to sell you a replacement car when they were forced to take this one back. Plus, you aren't the only person that will suffer if that happens. Do you really not care about how it will affect our grandparents?"
God, you're so dramatic. All of you need to calm down and relax. Just stop whining.
Meredith's selfishness wasn't just about money. One Thanksgiving, she decided at the last minute not to come to dinner. Grandma had spent days cooking her favorite dishes, sweet potato casserole, pecan pie, and was heartbroken when Meredith called.
I've got other plans.
Plans? But it's Thanksgiving. We were looking forward to spending it together as a family.
What family? You aren't my mother, and I'd rather do something fun. Yeah, well, I'll catch you next time.
Meredith replied before hanging up. That night, Grandma cried as we packed the untouched food into containers. I tried to comfort her, but my own resentment toward Meredith was growing stronger. After losing our parents, our grandparents had really stepped up and filled the void they left behind. We never had to worry about anything with them, and they truly were loving and wonderful people. It enraged me the way Meredith would treat them. As the years went by, it became clear that Meredith had no intention of changing. She moved in and out of the house, leaving chaos in her wake. Bills went unpaid, valuables went missing, and every confrontation ended with her blaming someone else. "Meredith, you've got to start paying rent."
Rent? This is Grandma and Grandpa's house. Why should I pay anything?
"Because they're on a fixed income. Do you even care how much stress you're causing them?"
Not my problem. Besides, we both know that they are loaded. They have more than enough money.
They're retired, though. Whatever money they have has to last until they pass away, and if we're lucky, they'll live for another 40 years.
I hope not. I, for one, could use that money.
I was so disgusted with her. It was a sad day when I realized that not only had I lost my parents, but at some point I had lost my sister as well. I didn't know who this horrible person was anymore, and I wanted nothing to do with her. And then things began to take a turn for the worse. Grandpa's health started to decline when I was in my late 20s. At first, it was little things, forgetting names, losing track of time. Then it got worse. He was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, and Grandma, who was already struggling with arthritis, became his full-time caregiver. Although in reality, most of the caregiving fell to me. They tried their best to be self-sufficient, but they needed my help more and more. One day after Grandpa had a particularly bad day, I confronted Meredith in the hopes that I could enlist her help. Meredith, I need your help. We can't do this alone.
I'm not a nurse, Corey. Find someone else. Maybe find someone that gives a crap.
They took us in when we had no one. Don't you feel any obligation to repay that kindness?
Nope. I didn't ask to be born into this family. And besides, why would I want to take care of them? I can think of way more fun things to do than to hang around two old farts and a loser like you.
Her apathy was infuriating, and her cruelty was unbearable. She started yelling at Grandpa when he forgot things, calling him useless and a burden. She mocked Grandma for being slow and clumsy, and when Joe entered the picture, things got even worse. Joe was everything you'd expect from someone who would date Meredith: loud, rude, and completely devoid of empathy. He mocked Grandpa's memory lapses and laughed at Grandma's struggle to carry laundry up the stairs. One night, after Joe made a particularly cruel joke about Grandma's cane, I snapped, "Get out of this house, Joe. What are you gonna do, Corey? Lecture me? Because we both know that you don't have the balls to throw me out yourself. You're too weak to do anything. Leave. Now!"
He's my guest, Corey. You don't get to decide who stays.
A week later, they were gone. They left without a word, abandoning our grandparents in their time of greatest need. I wish they had left because I told them to, but I think they were just sick of constantly being asked to help out around the house. At first, I was furious. But as the days passed, I realized life was better without them. The house was quiet and peaceful, and as an added benefit, my grandma and grandpa seemed happier. For the next few years, I devoted myself to caring for my grandparents. It was hard, physically, emotionally, financially, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. They had given me everything, and I was determined to repay them. But eventually, my grandpa's illness caught up with him. He passed away on a crisp November morning. He held my hand and asked me to look after my grandma, and then he said that he loved us both very much, and then he was gone. But Grandma didn't last long without him. 3 days later, she passed away in her sleep. At their funeral, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss, but also peace. They had been together for over 50 years, and now they were reunited. Honestly, I felt that they loved each other so much that the thought of living without one another was too much, and I think my grandma died so that she could be with him again. After the funeral, I returned to the house to start packing up their belongings. That's when Meredith showed up, with Joe.
Hey, baby brother. I saw the good news online.
Good news? How can you still be such a ghoul?
I see you still can't take a joke and that you still have a rod up your butt. What other reason would I be here in this dump? I'm here for the will, of course.
What are you doing here? You can't be serious. After abandoning them years ago, you think they would leave you with something? Why not? It's what we're owed. We're family after all. You abandoned them. You don't deserve a dime.
Joe and I are here to collect our share. Spare me the lecture, Corey. We'll wait here until the will is read. And once we get our share, then and only then will we leave.
You can't stay here. Besides, the will's reading is private. You two assholes aren't allowed in the office.
Yeah, right. As if a scrawny loser like you could keep us out. Go ahead and try and stop us.
The next morning, I left extra early in the morning to meet with the lawyer. When the will was read, I was stunned. My grandparents had left everything to me. The house, their savings, everything. The lawyer handed me a note in Grandma's handwriting. Use this money to see the world, Corey. Live the life you've always dreamed of. When I returned home, I quickly packed a bag and headed to the airport. Just as my grandma had instructed, I bought a ticket to the Bahamas, and once there, I booked a stay at an all-inclusive resort. It had been years since I had been on vacation, and I needed the downtime badly. It was expensive since I did everything last minute, but I now had the money to afford it, and time away did wonders for me. However, my vacation was interrupted.
Where are you? When's the reading?
I'm on vacation and it already happened. They left everything to me.
You're lying!
No, Meredith. They gave me everything because they knew I was the only one who cared.
That's not fair. What about Joe and I?
It's more than fair, actually. But what I don't get is why you think I should care. You're both adults. Why do I need to take care of you?
Because we're broke, Corey. We owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to debt collectors, and we needed our grandparents' money to get us out of debt. We can't even afford to buy groceries. We are that poor. Please have some sympathy for us.
She did her best to try to make me feel sympathy for them, but it wasn't working. After the way they had treated me and our grandparents, there was no way I was going to have an ounce of sympathy for them. That's when I came up with a rather evil plan. Fine. I'll help you.
Wait, you will?
Yes, I will, but I'm not ending my vacation early for you two. You'll have to come here to me. I'm in China.
China? We can't afford a plane ticket to China. We literally have no money at all.
It's fine. I'll pay for you two to fly out here, and I'll even put you up in a 5-star hotel. We'll sip champagne and eat caviar while we hash out things. Sound good?
Oh my God, yes! The flight better be first class, though.
I agreed, and I paid for a one-way trip to China for them. Thankfully, greed made my sister and Joe incredibly blind and stupid because they didn't notice that the flights were one-way, and they didn't even question why I had traveled to China, of all places, whereas I was in the Bahamas. While they were flying across the ocean, I called the police office in China where they were to land, and I described my sister and Joe to the officers, and I lied to them and told them that they were drug traffickers. The police took my story seriously, and they arrested Joe and Meredith shortly after they landed. Of course, without any money, they couldn't afford a lawyer, and so they were railroaded through the Chinese judicial system. From what I heard, they ended up serving several months in jail while the whole thing was sorted out. Meanwhile, back home, I sold my grandparents' house. It was a beautiful house, but there were too many painful memories there, and I wanted a fresh start, so I sold it and moved across the country to the coast where I bought a house right on the beach with a very high-tech security system. I also spent some of my inheritance on buying a cafe near to my new home. It took a bit to get both just the way I wanted them, but I built a life for myself there, and whenever I wasn't working, I was traveling the globe as my grandmas had wanted for me. I know one day that Joe and Meredith will find a way to get back home, but I doubt it will be anytime soon, and even then, I didn't exactly leave a trail for them to follow, so it will be many years before they figure out where I am. Should they ever find me though, I plan to hit them with a restraining order. As for me, in the meantime, I'm living the good life. I do miss my grandparents, but I also know that they would be proud that I stood up to my sister, and I know that they would very much approve of how I live my life. Thanks for watching.
My parents were obvious about preferring my sister to me. They never let me go on excursions, never paid for any school events, delayed my tuition every time, and let me take public transport to school. However, my sister's case was the exact opposite. Whatever she needed was provided for her. My parents would boast about her everywhere they went while I was forgotten. I was older than my sister with 2 years, but my parents made sure the school put us in the same class. Hi, my name's Misun. In a few weeks, I'll be celebrating my 35th birthday. I live in my own apartment and have 2 companies of my own. I have no family except my husband and children, as I was disowned and kicked out by my very own parents years ago. Growing up, I wasn't much of a genius academically. However, I did my best and always emerged in the top 5. My parents didn't seem satisfied by that. Instead, they were only interested in my younger sister, Sujin, who never failed to top her class. We both used to be in the top 5, but from the moment we got into senior high school, she began to top the class. I wouldn't say that was the only reason they preferred her, but that was the main one. My parents were obvious about preferring my sister to me. They never let me go on excursions, never paid for any school events, delayed my tuition every time, and let me take public transport to school. However, my sister's case was the exact opposite. Whatever she needed was provided for her. My parents would boast about her everywhere they went while I was forgotten. I was older than my sister with 2 years, but my parents made sure the school put us in the same class. During our high school graduation, I was made to sit away from them. When I was acknowledged as the 5th best student, my parents didn't cheer. They ignored me and faced my sister instead, getting her ready for her award. As expected, she was the overall best. My parents cheered the most. They nearly followed her to receive the award. I was all alone, feeling bad and blaming myself for not being good enough. After the ceremony, I approached my family. My presence was unnoticed until I touched my mom. On our way home, I was made to listen to them praising my sister nonstop until we got home. We got into college together, and it was even worse there. I had a hard time trying to take in everything, but my genius sister seemed to be having it easy. As always, she topped the class. However, I was unable to be among the top 5 as I used to be. College wasn't so easy. After the results of our first exams were released, my parents flared up on seeing I was among the top 10.
You idiot! We barely managed you being in the top 5, and you had the guts to go even lower? What kind of a daughter are you? How could you do this to us, huh? Your sister topped her class again. Do you have no atom of shame in you?
This is the reason we love her more. She's better than you could ever be.
While they were yelling, my sister walked in.
You gotta study well, son. You're so terrible. I can't cope with the fact that you're my sister.
She's nothing but an unserious fellow. You shouldn't be speaking to her.
I just thought she needed to be told the truth. Son, don't you think you should drop out? Our parents barely have enough money for me. You should drop out so they can focus on me.
Yes, your sister's right. You should drop out and get a job or something. I don't think you're meant for education.
Consider that option. You don't have to worry about getting a job later in the future. Your sister's going to grow up and own her own hospital. You could work for her later on.
I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I'm going to work harder and emerge with a better result.
You know that's impossible, Misun.
Yes, son. You don't have to try. You can't get better results.
I wouldn't know unless I try. Excuse me. I walked away from their presence and headed to my room where I buried my face in my pillow and cried. The next exams, I was in the top 5 again. I returned home filled with excitement, but as usual, my parents ruined it.
Your sister was the overall best again. Do you think we would be happy seeing you come 3rd?
Get lost, loser. If only you could come right behind me. I know it's impossible for you to go past me, but at least quit being a loser and try being right behind me.
But I'm trying. I'm doing all my possible best to satisfy you all. This is unfair.
Unfair? You ungrateful wench. We let you stay at our house, put clothes on you, and even feed you. But what do you bring to us? Disappointment.
Ignore her, sweetheart. She can't help but try to pour her anger on someone.
If you say one more word, you'll get it from me. You good for nothing.
What did I ever do to y'all? You shouldn't have had me if all you planned to do was make me feel miserable every day of my life.
We do regret having you.
We would have been fine with our beautiful daughter.
You heard that, loser.
Why? Because she's brilliant and I'm average. Huh? I'm your daughter too. Love me too. I'm doing everything I can to impress you. I was in heavy tears, but they didn't seem to have even the slightest amount of pity for me.
Well, if you're being entitled to our love just because we're your parents, then I disown you.
What?
You heard him right, stupid. From this moment, you cease to be our daughter. Take your things and leave our house.
But I have nowhere to go. Please don't do this to me.
You could try sleeping in the streets. Make friends with your soon-to-be fellow homeless people.
I could hear the mockery in her so-called advice. I was sad. I didn't think my parents would ever disown me over my results. I went on my knees and begged them because I had nowhere to live except their house. Please don't kick me out. I could stay in your house as a stranger, if that's what you want. I could get a part-time job too. Just don't kick me out. I beg you.
Daddy, I'm getting irritated by her, please. Should I throw her bags out myself?
Oh, sweetheart, how can I let an intelligent young lady like you touch a loser's bag? I'll do it myself.
My father dashed into my room, took my things, and threw them out carelessly.
I never want to see you again, loser. Leave my house.
I tried to beg my mom, but she pushed me away roughly. Without a choice, I took my things and walked away, dejected. I was left alone on the streets, hungry and in tears. I'd also only finished my first year. I worried about where to get the money to further my education. I got a job at a multi-purpose factory 2 weeks later, but I lived on the streets for 2 whole months before I was able to get myself a small apartment. Although it was quite uncomfortable, I endured it. Life at the factory was insanely stressful, but the pay covered up for the stress. The next month, I already had my tuition fee. I spoke to the manager about working part-time.
This is going to cut a quarter out of your salary.
I was fine with that. I agreed and continued my education while working. Life was hard for me, but I was relentless. I maintained being in the top 5, ignoring my parents' obsession of topping the class. 3 years later, I was finally done. Fortunately, a month after, I got a better job at a successful company as the assistant marketing manager. I was also given a house and a company car. Those weren't my goals, but I was overjoyed knowing that I was slowly going up the ladder. Meanwhile, my sister came out as one of the best students. My parents were disappointed, as they expected her to maintain her streak until the end. However, they didn't lash out on her. 6 months later, she got a job as an assistant nurse. My parents were enraged.
Not even a nurse, but an assistant? We expected you to open up a hospital.
A hospital? Do you think it's that easy? How am I gonna open a hospital without money, huh?
Well, you better work hard to get a promotion and open a hospital soon. We need to start getting our money back.
But Sujin wasn't doing well at the hospital. In fact, she was the worst worker. Eventually, she was fired.
What? How dare you get fired?
How dare you yell at me? Did I fire myself? Huh?
Meanwhile, I, on the other hand, was the delicate egg of the company I worked for. I made the company grow bigger by working hard on the marketing of our products. Soon, we were one of the best. My salary was increased too. I saved up enough money and invested a lot. A year later, I was ready to start my own company. I informed them about it, and they were nice enough to support me by offering to be my first partner. With my great marketing skills, I was able to grow my company rapidly. 2 years later, I opened my second company. My family, however, were having it hard. Sujin couldn't get a lasting job. She was doing everything wrongly.
You used to top your classes. What's happening to you?
Top my classes, my ass!
What?
Yes, I knew you both loved me more than me, son. I needed to find a way to maintain that. Seeing how you glorified our cousins who topped their class, I thought I could go that way. So, I stole your money every session and paid the teachers to make me top the class. Did you wonder why it didn't happen during graduation? Because they didn't want my money anymore.
What are you saying?
I'm saying you ruined my life. I didn't even want to be a doctor. It was your dream, not mine.
My parents were shocked. To make it worse, they discovered, 2 weeks later, that my sister was pregnant and had no idea who owned the child. As if that wasn't enough, she tried to abort the baby, but it was the worst decision. She'd gone to a quack. My parents took her to a hospital and she was diagnosed with kidney issues in addition to her initial problem. My parents were heartbroken. For the first treatment, they had to sell their house to pay. They both squatted with my father's unmarried sister. I suddenly got a call from them.
Misun, child, please help us. We don't have enough money for your sister's treatment and can barely even feed. Do something, please.
I could tell how desperate they were. I'm sorry, but I have no sister. I also have no parents, and I have no idea who you both are. Nor do I have any money to give to you.
Don't do this to us, Misun. We know you have 2 companies that are doing well. You're rich. You should help us because we took care of you.
Like I said, I don't know who you are. If you call me again, I'll be forced to report you to the cops. I wish you nothing but sadness. With that, I ended the call. They tried as hard as they could, but they eventually lost Sujin. Staying too long without treatment led to her death. My father's sister, who was housing them, also kicked them out since she was planning to get married. They were left without a house, money, or child. Last time I heard about them, I learned that they'd lost their minds and were roaming on the streets. I'm married to a lovely man who's completely different from my father, and he also loves our twin girls equally. That's all that matters. Thanks for watching. make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. I was lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, when she turned to me with a fake gasp.
Amy must have taken it. She's been acting suspicious lately.
Amy, is this true?
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was too weak to argue, but I managed to speak. I didn't take anything, Dad. You have to believe me.
Of course, she'd deny it. Thieves always do. I can't believe this.
Dad looked at me, disappointment all over his face.
I can't do this anymore, Amy. You've brought nothing but trouble since your mother died.
Those words hit me harder than any illness ever could. The next day, Dad told me I wasn't welcome at home anymore.
You're old enough to figure things out on your own.
Christine stood behind him, laughing.
It's for the best, Amy. You need to learn some responsibility.
They left me in the hospital with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, no home, no family. I was heartbroken, but I wasn't broken. I vowed to prove them wrong, to show them I was worth something. When my mom died, I thought my life would never be the same. She was everything to me. Kind, loving, and always there when I needed her. My dad, he was different. He loved her, I think, but he wasn't the kind of man who expressed it. She got sick when I was 13, and he tried his best to take care of her at first. But as her condition got worse, he gave up. He said, we couldn't afford her treatment anymore. Mom died in our small living room because we couldn't even afford to keep her in the hospital. I remember holding her hand as she whispered her last words, asking me to take care of my dad and telling me he did his best. I believed her. I really did. But 6 months later, he rented a bigger house and brought in another woman who became my stepmom, as well as her 2 sons. When Christine and her kids moved in, I hoped she would try to make things better, to fill some of the emptiness that lingered in the house after my mom's death. But I was wrong. She made things worse. So much worse. At first, she hid her true colors behind fake smiles and overly sweet words when Dad was around. But the moment he left the room, it was like a mask fell off her face.
Amy, don't just sit there like a pig. Clear the table.
This was on her first week in our home. We had just finished dinner, and I thought she was joking, but her sharp glare told me she wasn't. I'll do it in a minute. I'm sorry. I always try to relax after eating to help with digestion.
Look, I don't care if you die of indigestion. You'll do it now. Don't make me repeat myself.
It was just the beginning. Soon, clear the table turned into wash the dishes, and wash the dishes turned into cleaning the entire house.
This place is filthy. How do you even live like this? You're a girl. Don't you have any pride in keeping things tidy?
She didn't just make me clean. She made me feel like I was disgusting for not being perfect. She'd walk into a room and deliberately knock things over, then blame me for the mess.
Clean this place up again, Amy, and this time do it properly.
Even when I worked hard, it was never enough. She'd inspect my work like I was some kind of servant, and make me redo it over and over again. Then there were her ridiculous rules. I wasn't allowed to sit on the couch because she claimed I'd ruin it. I couldn't use the bathroom for more than 5 minutes because I was wasting water. And don't even get me started on meals.
You eat too much, Amy. You're not a child anymore. You don't need all that food.
She started serving me portions so small, I was constantly hungry. Meanwhile, she, her kids, and Dad would feast like kings. One time, I dared to ask for seconds at dinner. Christine, can I have a little more rice?
More? Haven't you had enough? We're not running a buffet here, you know, and we definitely don't want to start rearing pigs.
I could see my dad glance at me, but he didn't say a word. He just kept eating. The worst part was when Christine's punishments got petty and cruel. Like the time I accidentally spilled some juice on the kitchen floor.
Clean it up, and don't think you're done there. You're scrubbing the entire floor on your hands and knees.
She made me spend hours cleaning every inch of the kitchen while she sat back and scrolled through her phone. Or the time she accused me of losing her necklace, even though I never touched it.
You've always been careless, Amy. This is why I don't trust you with anything important.
But I didn't touch your necklace, Christine.
Are you calling me a liar? Go look for my necklace now, you bloody liar!
I searched the house for hours, only for her to find the necklace in her own purse. She didn't even apologize. But the thing that hurt the most wasn't Christine's cruelty. It was my dad's indifference. He saw how she treated me, but he never defended me. I asked him about it sometimes. Dad, why is she being so mean to me?
Don't exaggerate, Amy. Christine is just trying to teach you responsibility. Your mother didn't teach you well enough. That's why you see Christine's actions as cruel.
Responsibility? Was that what he called it? Forcing me to clean, cook, and eat scraps while they lived comfortably? And how dare he disrespect my late mother like that? I wanted to speak, but Christine summoned me, immediately ending the conversation. Christine had this way of twisting every situation to make it look like I was the problem. And Dad, being the spineless man he was, always believed her.
Richard, Amy's slacking off again. She tried to argue with me the other day. She has no respect for this household.
Amy, you need to listen to Christine. She's trying to help you.
Help me. She wasn't helping me. She was breaking me. Even her kids were encouraged to treat me like I was beneath them. Christine's sons followed her lead like little shadows.
Why are you sitting on the couch? Mom said you're not allowed?
They'd tattle on me for the smallest things, and Christine would blow everything out of proportion.
I told you not to sit on the couch, Amy. Do you think you're special or something? Were you about to argue with my child? How dare you? They're superior to you in this house, and you should respect them, you stupid girl.
Her boys would laugh while I stood there, humiliated. One day, I came home from school to find that Christine had gone through my things. My diary, my clothes, everything.
You have no privacy in this house, Amy. If you're hiding something, I'll find it and I'll take it. You can't do anything about it, so it's better you get a bowl to fill with your tears.
I felt violated, like nothing I owned was truly mine anymore. The final straw came when Christine accused me of stealing money. I had been saving up my little allowance for months to buy myself a new pair of shoes.
Where did you get this money, Amy? Did you take it from me?
No, I saved it.
Liar. You've been sneaking around, haven't you? Or have you started seeing boys?
She took the money, and my dad let her.
You shouldn't have stolen the money. How can you save that up? You surely stole from her. You deserve the punishment.
One day, Christine's accusations went too far. I'd been sick for weeks, coughing and running a fever. But Christine refused to let me rest.
You're not that sick, Amy. Stop being dramatic.
She would still make me do chores and barely let me rest. Eventually, I collapsed at school and was rushed to the hospital. That's when it happened. Christine showed up at the hospital with Dad. She was pacing the room, pretending to look worried, when she suddenly gasped.
Richard, my money was stolen from my bag at home, and I think Amy is here pretending to be sick after stealing my money.
I was lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, when she turned to me with a fake gasp.
Amy must have taken it. She's been acting suspicious lately.
Amy, is this true?
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was too weak to argue, but I managed to speak. I didn't take anything, Dad. You have to believe me.
Of course she'd deny it. Thieves always do. I can't believe this.
Dad looked at me, disappointment all over his face.
I can't do this anymore, Amy. You've brought nothing but trouble since your mother died.
Those words hit me harder than any illness ever could. The next day, Dad told me I wasn't welcome at home anymore.
You're old enough to figure things out on your own.
Christine stood behind him, laughing.
It's for the best, Amy. You need to learn some responsibility.
They left me in the hospital with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, no home, no family. I was heartbroken, but I wasn't broken. I vowed to prove them wrong, to show them I was worth something. When the head doctor, Dr. Harrison, heard that I had been abandoned, he wasted no time stepping in. I was still weak, lying in a hospital bed, unsure of what would happen to me. But he reassured me like a real father.
You're not alone anymore, Amy. I'll take care of you.
True to his word, he took me into his home. His wife, Laura, and their 3 children welcomed me with open arms. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I wasn't treated as a burden or a servant. I was loved. Laura made sure I caught up on school, buying me supplies and helping me with my homework. Their children treated me like a sister. They shared their rooms and everything with me. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, but never thought I'd have. Dr. Harrison didn't just stop with high school. When I expressed my dream of becoming a doctor like him, he promised to support me all the way. They paid for my college and med school, cheering me on at every milestone. 10 years later, I was no longer the scared, abandoned girl I once was. I was Dr. Amy, the head doctor at the very hospital where my life had changed. One busy afternoon, the emergency room doors burst open, and paramedics rushed in with 4 stretchers. As I approached, I couldn't hide my shock. It was my father, Christine, and her 2 sons. The paramedics explained they had been in a terrible car accident. The driver of the taxi survived without a scratch, but his passengers were badly injured. Christine and the boys were critically injured, while my father had severe trauma to his eyes. Despite everything they'd done to me, I pushed my emotions aside and ensured they received the best care possible. Hours later, the surgeries ended. Both of Christine's sons were gone. Their injuries had been too severe. When Christine regained consciousness and learned of their deaths, she let out a wail that shook the room. Her grief was so overwhelming that she suffered a heart attack, which left her with partial paralysis from a stroke. My father's injuries left him completely blind. He was devastated, but not as much as Christine, who had lost everything in one night. As head doctor, I had the difficult task of discussing their medical bills. I approached their room with my clipboard, feeling a strong sense of justice as I looked at their broken forms. Your medical bills are substantial. If you can't pay within a week, we'll have to discharge you.
We don't have that kind of money. Before this accident, we had lost almost everything to some scammers. Please, we need time.
My dad recognized my voice and wanted to hug me, but I refused and maintained a stern expression. Christine was surprised that I had become so successful.
Hey, Amy, I'm your mother. Be nice to us and help us. We are family.
No, we are not. You are all strangers to me. No. If you can't pay your bills, then you need to make arrangements to leave. They couldn't pay. I knew they couldn't. 3 days later, they were forced out of the hospital. Christine, barely able to walk, and my blind father struggling as well. I later realized my father had no choice but to beg on the streets, while my stepmom, who was partially paralyzed, lay in bed at home, unable to ever be abusive to anyone. My stepmom tried contacting me via phone severally, but I never replied and blocked her number. I never looked back. My life with the Harrisons was more than I could have ever hoped for. They taught me what family truly meant: love, support, and kindness. And while my biological father and stepmother faced the consequences of their actions, I thrived with the family I had found. Thanks for watching.
Apparently, the professor's spies had caught her speaking to her boyfriend and told Professor Colin about it. Upon her arrival the next day, he had the boys punish her by sitting on her back. All of them spent 5 minutes each sitting on her back. Hello there. My name is Ethan, and I'm currently aged 32. Some years back, I experienced the fall of a toxic professor. After high school, I was in quite a fix as I got accepted by the 2 college institutions I applied at. I talked to a cousin who was in one of the colleges, and he advised me to pick the second, as the one he was attending wasn't as good as the second, according to things he'd heard. Following his advice, I picked the second one, but that decision turned out to be the worst I've ever made, even after years had passed. On my first day, I noticed how the students in my department were always quiet and observing. I was used to being loud and conversing with people, but no one spoke until they were out of the school. I'd concluded that there was probably a school rule that refused the students to speak within the school's building. It sounded odd, but I made myself believe that. However, that belief was changed the next week. After close watch, I discovered that students in the other departments were completely different from the ones in my department. They were more playful and friendly. I didn't waste any time befriending them, since I considered the ones in my department dull and unfriendly. However, the other students revealed shocking news to me. Apparently, there was a professor who was a huge bully and also toxic with the students in my department. No one except them and the students in my department knew about his behavior. Why has no one reported him? I asked them.
Well, he's the hidden son of the president of the school. He told us that himself. If anyone tries to report him, he told us himself that he's going to ensure the person gets expelled. And he wasn't joking, he's so scary.
I did understand them. It's going to be so hard trying to go against the school's authorities. Hearing how the man was, I knew he'd be dangerous. Matter of fact, he could create fake evidence against any student who tried to report him. For 2 weeks, I didn't meet him. According to the students from the other department, he was on an important task. Now, I was even more shocked. Why were the students in my department being so obedient to his rules when he wasn't even present? I decided to speak to some of them. They never spoke to each other. Even while outside the school, the only time I caught a few speaking was on their phones. The few ones I approached seemed scared to speak to me. No matter how many times I tried to speak to them, they were like zombies. I returned to my friends in the other department and told them about it.
Well, they're all traumatized by his actions. Their self-esteem is at its lowest. He made them like that.
Hearing that, I was even more curious to experience him. I was eager for his return to the school. I needed to experience him to know how he could manipulate nearly 60 students to be scared of him even in his absence. My wish was granted 3 days later as Professor Colin returned to the school. That day, I had quite a lot to do at home. So, I ended up arriving at school a few minutes late. You must be new, so I suppose you do not know my rules. You must never arrive at this class after me. That's one of my rules. I'm sorry, but I read the rule book on my first day. There wasn't anywhere that it was stated about any professor having his own rules. As I said that, the whole class shockingly turned their eyes to me. I could feel their gazes on me, and it sort of encouraged me to be bold. Professor Colin got closer to me until he was right in front of me. The man was quite tall, making me small before him. I was scared, but I managed to maintain being bold. How dare a little brat like you talk back to me? Are you crazy? Not at all, sir. I'm neither a brat nor crazy. The rule book is against teachers having their rules, so I think you're wrong for going against it. Please, excuse me. I'll go take my seat now. I could see how shocked he was before I walked away, including the students. It was as though I'd done something which no one dared to do. Practically, I did, and that led to the beginning of my suffering. That day, I got to know that he had special students who obeyed him to the core. I knew from my seat partner. According to her, when Professor Colin first joined the school, they were reluctant in obeying his strange rules. What are his rules? I was forced to ask. I needed to know all of his so-called rules. When I was told, I nearly screamed out of shock. The students weren't allowed to say a word whenever he was present, and they had to be mindful of their actions when he was absent. I learned that he was obsessed with making them look more perfect than other students of the various departments. He ensured they stopped being friends with others and looked clean always. It would have been quite endurable if he stopped there, but he had some students spy on them after school hours, and those students became his favorite. The school authorities were unaware of the fact about him beating the students at the slightest provocation. Whenever his favorite students gave him news about a student speaking to friends outside school hours, he would punish them intensely and hit them. I asked why they couldn't tell their parents, and I was told about a student who tried it once, but got expelled by the school authorities. Apparently, the professor's spies had caught her speaking to her boyfriend and told Professor Colin about it. Upon her arrival the next day, he had the boys punish her by sitting on her back. All of them spent 5 minutes each sitting on her back. That was cruel. The girl's parents and her visited the school the next day, but Professor Colin and his spies swore, and went to the extent of crying, that the student was telling lies. Since there wasn't any evidence that her words were true, and none of them could confirm her truth because the professor had threatened to punish any student who did that, the girl was expelled on the ground that she tried to destroy a teacher's image. The school held their teachers very delicately, so any slander against them wasn't tolerated. They were pained that the girl had to leave, but they weren't about to risk the possibility of being in her situation if they spoke. I thought that was all, but there was still more. I got to know about an accident that led to a boy's right elbow getting destroyed forever. He'd attempted to fight back as Professor Colin was hitting him, but his spies stepped in, and they all gathered the boy, hitting him mercilessly until his elbow broke. The students had thought Professor Colin wouldn't get away with it, but they were presented with a twist. One of Professor Colin's spies stepped out and lied that he and the boy had both been involved in a fight that afternoon. According to him, the boy had intentionally mocked his status as an orphan and also bullied him non-stop for 2 weeks. That day, after the boy slapped him twice for no reason, he told them his anger took control of him and he fought back. The boy burst into tears, telling the school's president that he was sensitive when it came to his parents, and the boy knew, but he kept using it against him to cause a trigger. While he was at it, Professor Colin brought in 2 other spies who attested to the fact that their fellow spy was being truthful. With all that evidence against him, and with even more confirming words from Professor Colin, the school believed them. The spy who stepped up was punished by being made to clean the school for 3 days straight, while the true victim was suspended for 2 months. By the time he returned, he'd missed a lot, which took a huge toll on his results. All of those made the students even more scared of Professor Colin, and also believed that he was truly the hidden son of the school's president. I wasn't ready to sit back and allow that to continue. The students were going through a lot, psychologically, and it was even worse to know that they were being watched outside the school too. His spies were put ahead of every brilliant student in the department. All 5 of his spies occupied the first 5 positions, while others came behind them. The boys weren't intelligent. Professor Colin gave them the answers to his questions, and that way, they always passed. As a result, the true brilliant ones were made to have average results, no matter how hard they worked. For the first session of the year, I was among the top 20, something that had never happened. I was a brilliant student and hardly ever failed my exams, so it was quite shocking seeing my results. I refused to let Professor Colin's toxicity continue. Once when he was absent and his spies were away for lunch, I gathered a few students and told them we needed to speak up. They were exhausted themselves, and a few agreed to join me. Firstly, I planned for us to confront Professor Colin. While we did, 2 students were going to secretly record everything. With the recording, we were going to prove to the school's president that his son was killing the students mentally. On D-Day, while Professor Colin was speaking, I stood up and requested his attention. He turned and cast me a death glare. "How dare you, an unfortunate student who can never amount to anything in his society, disturb my class?" The 2 students were recording. One was using an audio recorder, and another was secretly using her phone. "It's a very important question, sir. I don't understand what this is about. You always give lengthy questions to us, but teach us so little." "Well, stupid, I do not give a damn about any of you understanding what I teach. I do not care about any of you except my boys. Is that clear? Now sit your ass down." I refused, as politely as possible, and insisted that he explained what he was teaching. That angered him, and he asked his spies to bring me out. They handled me carelessly and beat me up in front of all the students. I sacrificed that just to get evidence of his abuse. "I dare you to report me. I'm the president's son. If you dare, my father's not going to only expel you, but also make it impossible for another college to accept you. Try me." I had to miss school for 2 days to get treatment. Upon my return on the 3rd day, we marched to the president's office and told him everything, including the videos and audio. He was shocked. According to him, Professor Colin wasn't his son. They weren't even related. He called the other students, and after watching the video and hearing his assurance that he wasn't Professor Colin's father, they revealed all of his atrocities to the man. Immediately, the president called the cops. Before they arrived, all students and staff members were gathered at the school hall. The video was played to all, and Professor Colin's behavior was revealed, alongside his fake identity about being the president's son. Before he could make a move, the police arrived. In front of the whole school, Professor Colin was arrested and taken away. It didn't end there. His spies were all expelled from the school after being made to apologize to the whole school for their dirty behaviors to their fellow students. The president also ensured they were never accepted into any other college. Professor Colin, on the other hand, was made to serve 15 years in prison for physical abuse, emotional abuse, and stalking. After investigation, it was revealed that he also stalked teachers for no reason. The man was a psycho. His bank account was emptied, and his house was sold. The money was given to every student in his department as compensation, and the school funded their therapy sessions, as Professor Collins had mentally destroyed them. It's been years, and the last time I heard about Professor Colin, he was given extra 10 years after it was discovered that he stole from the school to buy his house, and also sold some school properties which were left in his care. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. After that, my life continued spiraling. We were soon done with college, and my dad got me a car as a gift. Of course, Johnson received nothing, but he still didn't mind. Johnson immediately began applying for jobs. When he finally got one, my parents stopped feeding him.
Just 1 month, please. I haven't received my first salary. I can't survive without food, please.
Do I look like I care about your existence? I have my son. You're just an unwanted duplicate. If you can't feed yourself at this age, then shame on you.
Shame on me? But you still feed Jonathan and you never complain. All I ask for is a month and I'll never bother you guys again. How dare you compare yourself with Jonathan? Just because you stole his face doesn't mean you're him, got it? He's the only one I consider my son, and I refuse to shoulder your responsibility. You're grown. Take care of yourself.
It's strange how life can change so fast, so drastically, and yet, when you look back, every step seems like inevitable. My name is Jonathan, and I had a twin brother. Well, had, not because he died, but because he's no more in my life. I chased him out. Growing up, I was the star, the golden child, the genius, the apple of my parents' eyes. I saw how they adored me, looked at me with pride and admiration every time I brought home a perfect score or another certificate. To them, I was brilliant, a future doctor or engineer, someone with the promise of greatness. But my twin, Johnson, was just there, fading into the background.
Jonathan, you're going to do big things one day, aren't you? You're already making us so proud. I can't wait to see what the future holds for you and us, your parents.
She'd say this right in front of Johnson, as if he wasn't even there. It was as if he were a shadow, something that was there, but didn't matter enough to be noticed. And Johnson, he'd just sit there, pretending he didn't hear, but his eyes always showed he was sad. I sometimes caught the way he clenched his fists, but he never said anything. He'd just swallow whatever pain or hurt he was feeling. It only got worse as we grew older. My dad was no different. To him, Johnson was just a disappointment, a reminder of everything average and unremarkable.
You're so clumsy, awkward, and dull. Why can't you be more like Jonathan?
That question soon became a chant in our house. And it wasn't like Johnson didn't try. He'd study late into the night, his textbooks spread out on his desk, his eyes red and tired. But no matter how hard he worked, he could never match my scores, never reach the bar that had been set for me. And eventually, I think he stopped trying altogether. For me, life was easy. I got whatever I wanted, new clothes, the best school supplies, the latest gadgets. And I knew that, as long as I kept my grades high, I could get away with anything. The first time I was reported for skipping school, my dad blamed the school for not making classes interesting for me.
He's a brilliant child. If your school wasn't bad, he'd never skip. If my child doesn't return home today from wherever your incompetence made him run off to, I'll report this school.
When I came home late, reeking of cigarettes and sweat, they just brushed it off.
Boys will be boys.
They laughed and then patted me on the shoulder as if my behavior were just a phase. I took advantage of that freedom. I started running with a rough crowd, kids who knew how to bend the rules, and soon I was smoking, drinking, doing things my parents would have grounded anyone else for. But for me, they looked the other way, always assuming the best. After all, I was a genius. What harm could I do? But as I sank deeper into that world, my grades started slipping, but my reputation as the genius stayed intact. I began blackmailing teachers to scare them into compliance, making sure they kept my scores at the top. They were afraid of me, afraid of what I'd do if they crossed me. And my parents? They didn't suspect a thing. They kept showering me with praise, convinced I was still their perfect son. I was behind the gym at home one day, puffing on a cigarette, when I saw Johnson watching me. He had a horrified look in his eyes, and for a second, I thought he'd run and tell our parents. But instead, he just walked over to me and tried to talk to me, to reason with me.
Jonathan, you don't have to do this. It's dangerous and could damage your life. There's so much more you could be.
I looked at him, that kid who was supposed to be my twin but felt like a stranger, and I felt a surge of anger. Who was he to lecture me, to tell me what I could and couldn't do? So I snapped. I beat him up, right there, until he was lying on the ground, bruised and bleeding. I told him to keep his mouth shut, or I'd make him regret it. When we got into the house, my parents didn't ask what happened, didn't even care enough to wonder why he looked so beat up. Their only concern was that I was safe, that their prized son had come home unharmed.
Jonathan, I'm so glad you're home. Let's order pizza to celebrate your last test score.
Later that night, I thought about it. I'd hurt my own brother, my own flesh and blood, and no one cared. In a way, it was thrilling, proof that I held all the power in our family. After that, my life continued spiraling. We were soon done with college, and my dad got me a car as a gift. Of course, Johnson received nothing, but he still didn't mind. Johnson immediately began applying for jobs. When he finally got one, my parents stopped feeding him.
Just 1 month, please. I haven't received my first salary. I can't survive without food, please.
Do I look like I care about your existence? I have my son. You're just an unwanted duplicate. If you can't feed yourself at this age, then shame on you.
Shame on me? But you still feed Jonathan and you never complain. All I ask for is a month and I'll never bother you guys again. How dare you compare yourself with Jonathan? Just because you stole his face doesn't mean you're him, got it? He's the only one I consider my son, and I refuse to shoulder your responsibility. You're grown. Take care of yourself.
I can't tell how he did it, but Johnson managed to survive the whole of the first month without my parents feeding him. Life after college was too boring. I didn't have a job, couldn't even get a stable girlfriend, so I moved on to heavier drugs, stronger drinks, and anything that my friends brought to drown my thoughts. Johnson stayed out of my way. He was just there, existing in the same house, but barely part of my world. He was hardly ever at home because his work required him to work late. I doubt my parents ever noticed that. They were too busy working hard to take care of my needs to notice someone they thought of as a nobody. But still, something about him bothered me. His silence, his calm acceptance of the unfairness, the way he never fought back. I hated him for it. I wanted him to react, to give me a reason to hate him more. So I started making his life miserable, little by little. I'd steal money from my parents and blame it on him, mess with his things, humiliate him every chance I got. I was relentless, testing the limits of his patience, waiting for him to snap. But he never did. He'd just take it, and that only made me angrier. Then one day, he was gone. He left a note, simple and to the point. He thanked our parents for bringing him into the world, but he said he couldn't stay in a place where he wasn't wanted. He was leaving, for good. When I showed the note to my parents, they barely reacted.
Good riddance. He was useless here anyways. I barely even remember his existence sometimes.
I also thought it was good that he left, but I soon realized that not seeing him regularly anymore was making me feel empty. So, I threw myself deeper into partying, drinking, smoking, anything that numbed the strange ache inside me. Then, I discovered gambling. It was thrilling at first, the high of the stakes, the rush of winning. But soon, it turned dark. I started losing, and as my debts piled, I switched gears. I gambled away my car, my phone, anything of value. Eventually, I even stole my parents' house documents, and I lost that too, in a single, disastrous bet. When my parents found out, they were devastated. My dad managed to get us a small apartment, but he was broken. For the first time, he looked at me with something other than pride. He begged me to stop, to change. He'd lost everything, and I was all he had left.
Jonathan, please. You're all we have left. Please change.
I promised I would, but promises were easy to break. I kept gambling, stealing, doing whatever I could to keep feeding the addiction that had taken over my life. One night, I gambled with the wrong people. When I couldn't pay them, they came after my parents. My parents paid the price for my mistakes. They died because of me. After that, everything went black. I took harder drugs, stopped eating, stopped caring. I roamed the streets until the government picked me up and placed me here, in this rehab center. One day, I was sitting in the common room when I saw Johnson, my twin, on the television screen. He was being interviewed as a writer and actor. He was famous, successful, everything I'd once thought I would be. The interviewer asked him about his family, and his response broke something inside me.
I don't have a family, I'm on my own.
And in that moment, everything hit me. All those years I'd spent tormenting him, trying to destroy him, It had all been for nothing. While I'd torn myself apart, trying to bring him down, he'd risen, using the pain I'd caused as fuel for his success. I sat there in tears. I destroyed myself, thinking I was destroying him. And now here I was, alone, a broken man with nothing left, watching my twin brother on the television, a man of success and dignity. I decided to write him a letter to ask for his forgiveness. I talked to the authorities at the rehab center, and they allowed me and even helped me post the letter to him. I expected a heartfelt response, him telling me he'd forgiven me and asking if we wanted our family back. I expected that. However, his reaction was far from that. It was short and shattered my heart. All he said as a response to my letter was, "Sorry, I don't know you." I cried that night like I'd never cried before. I'd lost him forever, no doubt. And I dared not even blame him. He deserved to be happy, and I deserved to pay for everything I did to him. He was my twin, and I should have been nicer to him. I should have stood by him when my parents were torturing him with their favoritism, but I never did. I was a bad brother, and he had every right to cut me off just like I did. I didn't try contacting him again. The next year, when I left the rehab center, I had to live in a very small apartment provided by the government for people like me. Do I regret everything I did? Absolutely. In fact, I would change it all if I had the power to turn back the clock. But that's impossible. Money was tight, and instead of getting a job, I turned to selling drugs. One early morning, I heard a loud bang as the police knocked down my door. They came in with dogs, searched my apartment, found the drugs, and I was locked up. Now, I have to live the rest of my life in prison, burdened with guilt over my parents' death and for separating my brother from our family. Yes, my parents played a huge part in what happened, but he didn't deserve any of it, and they didn't deserve to die. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.